Today we're talking baby bilingualism. It's a fact that babies are born with the natural ability to learn multiple languages. But what about your children? If you're like me, you might have grown up speaking only one language fluently. But in this video, you're going to learn how to raise multilingual children, especially if you only speak one language. Welcome to Weirder Futures. I'm your co-host, Nick P. And if you like imagining ways that we can reshape our world, give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. Some backstory. My grandmother grew up speaking French in Louisiana. My other grandmother grew up speaking Italian and Genovese in Chicago. And then one of my grandfathers was a Sicilian speaker. That's 4 languages I could have potentially been raised in alongside English. And I got none of them. I was so frustrated with my poor ability to speak and understand other languages as I was studying them in high school. I felt like being a monolingual was a curse. When people would see my last name and ask if I spoke Italian, I was always embarrassed to tell them I couldn't. So, do you, speak Italian? No, bro. I wish. But now we have more resources than ever before for teaching ourselves and our children languages. And we can start the work of fixing the damage that colonialism and global capitalism is still working on the languages of the world. We did a whole video about language diversity, and we've got a link in the details below. I've read a lot about language revitalization movements, and a lot of the content misses the crucial focus on child bilingualism. Bilingualism from birth is how we make new native speakers. With multilingualism, we can save the world's languages, participate in our cultures more deeply, and be able to communicate with more people. Really, at the end of the day, we take the ability to speak more than one language from being something weird to being something normal. Does that mean in this situation I want a weirder future or a more normal future? Before we get into it, let's talk about the big elefante in the room. What if you don't speak another language? It is still very possible to raise a baby in a language that you didn't grow up with. That's how we got into the mess we're in now, with half of the world's languages at risk. Our grandparents or great-grandparents learned the dominant language and decided to speak only that to their children. But we can do this in reverse. Irish speakers have made a point of raising their children in their language, Irish, even as they are still learning it themselves. Side note, I saw this pamphlet cover online called The Sharp Edge of Language Revival, English-Speaking Parents Raising Irish-Speaking Children. I can't get a hold of the pamphlet, but I love that title. The benefit of this approach is that the child takes a lot of time to grow. So you have time to improve your grammar, learn more words, and work on your accent alongside the baby, even if you're starting from scratch. Babies are slow. Take your time and look up what you're trying to say. Raising a child bilingually is very possible, even if you didn't grow up with 2 languages. Chelsea and I are planning on having a little one shortly, and we intend to raise the baby with English, Italian, and Sicilian. These are all family languages that are important to us. I now speak Italian very well and Sicilian very sloppily, but well enough to have a Sicilian YouTube channel, link. But I am not a native speaker of either, so in preparation, I've read many books on bilingualism and want to share the key points for raising a baby with more than one language. Number 1, make a plan. This involves picking a strategy like one parent, one language, or mother language at home. So for us, we're doing one parent, one language, which really means one parent, 2 languages in my case. So Chelsea will speak English with the baby, and I'm only going to speak Italian and Sicilian to the baby, alternating Sicilian on one day and Italian the next, for the next 18 years. Cool. Make a plan, commit, and be ready to adapt. You might move to a different country. What are you going to do? What languages will you speak? Be ready to change this plan. Focus on direct communication with the child. Narrate what's happening. The Montessori method recommends this in whatever language you use, so the baby can get accustomed to many different words. If you don't speak the target language fluently, you can compile a list of common words and grammatically correct phrases that you'll need to use with the baby. Practice them well. Repetition is good for you and the baby. I've heard a lot of people talking about teaching children a language, and ironically, this is most common with minority languages and dialects. The parents think that when the child is old enough, they can teach them a language by telling them words like, oh, this means that, or saying a few phrases. Let me tell you, nothing is more guaranteed to fail and lead to the death of a language. We do not teach our languages to children. We speak them with them. So start speaking your language with them as soon as possible. Read. Read as much as possible to the baby, but aim for daily. Books provide rich language with words and grammar we might not use in everyday speech. Age-appropriate books with pictures are a must. But in the first few months of life, you can read pretty much anything you want because the baby is still learning the sounds and cadence of your voice. So read your favorite book, just do it out loud. If your language is lacking in baby books or doesn't have much written at all, it might be your job to create learning materials. Once again, the development of the baby works with you here. In the beginning, you only need one word next to an image. As the child gets older, you will need one sentence next to an image. You essentially have 2 years to work at this level before you start needing more complex sentences. I see lots of indigenous tribes working on children's books. Keep up the amazing work. Create as much as you possibly can. I'd love to see more indigenous board books because board books are for very young babies. So here's like what a board book looks like. This is one for Italian. Little birds. See, just one word on each page. Beep, beep. But here is an example of a book that the folks at the Tunica tribe shared with me. It's got 2 stories. This actually got, pretty cool. It's in English and Tunica, and then they also have a really simple one too. That's it's just like one word for Christmas on each page, which is great. And so it doesn't have to be board book necessarily, but that's good for kids because they can't really hold paper that well. Sicilian has very little content for children. There are maybe like 4 baby books in the language that I can get access to here in the U.S. Here's like 2 of them. Pink is an ABC book, and here's a reworking of The Little Prince. So what I have to do is actually translate some simple books into the language myself. Here's an example. What's in the soil? I found this at a little free library, but Chi c'è na terra, and so I'm doing it like that. I've got Good Night Moon with, so I just write my Sicilian over the English. And that's what I do for right now. But if your desire is for your baby to speak a world language like Spanish, French, or Mandarin, there's a ton of content out there that you can find. So it's not going to be that hard, but if you speak a minority language, you're going to have to do a little bit of work yourself. Introduce other native speakers into their life, especially peer speakers. Hearing others, especially babies their age, using the language will demonstrate that the language has value and it isn't just a weird code used at home. This should be no problem if you're teaching a world language to your child, but if you're trying to raise them in a rare minority language, that you're not a native speaker of, Zoom calls can fill in some gaps, or some summer trips to immerse them in the language might be necessary. If you're making very, very slow progress in your personal language learning, you're going to really need to lean on native speakers here. Play dates, grandparents, au pairs, whatever. If it's impossible, if your language has lost all speakers, you can use recordings, videos, and songs to expose the child to native sounds. When to start? When the baby's in the womb. At 27 weeks, the baby can hear sounds outside the womb and begins to recognize and distinguish between different languages. So it's best to start reading to your baby in your target language before the baby's even born. From birth to age 15, the language learning capacity is described by Jürgen Meisel as a slowly closing door that's still possible to squeeze through. After 3 years and 5 months, babies no longer function as native speakers of a language in scientific testing. That's mostly to do with perceptions of accent that they can pick up in scientific tests that we probably wouldn't be able to hear. And then after 6 years, there's a further reduction in language learning capacity until the baby hits 15 and ends up like us, disgusting, heavily accented adults. It's not that dramatic. Young language learners still have remarkable learning capabilities and will learn much faster than adults. And as adults, we can still learn languages too, just not at such a quick rate as children. Any child that starts learning a language at 4 or 6 years old will still likely speak like a native as an adult, with maybe only some minor differences. But get the baby hearing the language ASAP so they can develop an ear for the sounds. Some words of caution. Many people are told that learning 2 languages would delay the baby's mental development or create only partial native speakers. This is false. It's a myth that's still perpetuated today, and it's probably going to show up in our comment section as well. Also, this isn't a competition. More languages isn't always necessarily better. So unless you have a real reason, raising the child in 4 or more languages will be very time consuming and difficult, and it's not a guarantee that they will speak all of the languages at the same level. Do what works for your family. And I mentioned saving rare languages. If you come from an indigenous tribe or speak a minority language, this is focused on you. If you're not indigenous and you think you're doing your part by raising your baby speaking Cherokee, maybe hold off. I've attached a link for people wanting to learn indigenous languages, and it gets into why it can be complicated, potentially harmful for outsiders to learn these languages willy-nilly. If you happen to live in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, the capital of the Cherokee Nation, then maybe learning Cherokee as a non-native person starts to make sense. I'm not the language police here, but think and do some planning before deciding on a language to raise your child in. I hope you were able to learn something today, and if you haven't considered bilingualism for your child, I hope this gives you something to think about. If you speak an Indigenous language or minority language, we're rooting for you. We have to keep these languages alive. Please reach out or leave a comment. Tell us about your journey and if you've tried raising bilingual children. Thanks for listening, folks.